At a crosswalk in Sacramento, Claire Bennett, heir and CEO of a huge corporation, froze for a second, not because she was afraid of traffic, but because she'd gotten used to watching the world rush straight past people. In front of her, Ethan Parker was holding the arm of a blind older man with quiet firmness, the way someone does when they choose to help even when nobody's going to thank them. The old man tightened his grip on his white cane, the signal blinked, and the watch on Ethan's wrist seemed to scream that he was losing something. Claire took a step forward, opened her mouth to say something, and closed it again, as if she understood that what she was seeing was bigger than it looked. There was one tiny detail in that gesture, small, almost invisible, that was going to make someone pay dearly before the day was over. Before we go on, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from, city, state, or country? Ethan Parker was the kind of employee who showed up early, not to impress anybody, but because that's just how he was wired. At morning in Sacramento, the air coming off the river was cold, and downtown was already awake in the loudest way possible. Buses screeching, people rushing across streets, a light rail humming in the distance with that short metallic sound. Near a busy corner, he saw an older man standing at the edge of the curb, way too still for a place that alive. Harold Bennett, elderly and blonde, gripped his white cane with a firm hand, but his face gave away the doubt, like he was trying to find a gap in all that noise. Ethan didn't stand there calculating. He stepped closer and spoke in a low, respectful tone. "Sir, would you like some help crossing?" Harold hesitated, the way people who hate depending on others always do, and tried listening to the flow of traffic to go on his own. But then a car flew by too fast, too close, and his whole body flinched on reflex. That's when Ethan offered his arm, felt the old man grab on tightly, and guided them both across with the rhythm of the signal through. Honks and impatient looks from drivers who act like the world is in too much of a hurry to make room for basic humanity. On the other side, Harold let out a slow breath, like he could finally breathe again. "Thank you. I wouldn't have made it alone today," he said, squeezing Ethan's hand with a strength that didn't match his fragile appearance. When Ethan checked his watch, his stomach dropped. 15 minutes. In the company parking lot, he tried to pick up his pace, straighten his shirt, pretend everything was normal, but it was already too late. Derek Walsh, his direct manager, was waiting with the posture of a man who enjoys the little power he has, just because he has it. He didn't ask why Ethan was late. He didn't give him a chance to explain. He just pointed at the glass-walled HR office, bright and cold, and dropped the line like a piece of policy. "Being late is unprofessional. We don't have room for that here." Ethan tried to explain the blind man, the risk, the intersection, but Derek raised a hand and cut him off. Flat. "You made your choice." Ethan walked out carrying a cardboard box, taking 3 years of effort home in small objects and a bitter taste in his throat that wasn't just anger, it was humiliation. What he didn't see was what happened across the street, inside a luxury car that had stayed parked just a little longer than usual. Claire Bennett, a young executive with a steady gaze, had watched the whole scene in silence. It wasn't a curious look. It was the look of someone who recognized something in what she had just seen. And while Ethan crossed the gate, doing everything he could not to fall apart in public, there was one thing he still hadn't realized. Someone had seen everything, and that unfair firing was about to become a much bigger problem than Derek imagined. Ethan Parker crossed the parking lot like he was carrying much more than a cardboard box. Inside it were a cheap picture frame, a baseball cap he wore on rough days, a beat-up notebook, and an ID badge that now felt like a joke. In Sacramento, the sun hadn't even decided if it wanted to show up, and still the light bounced off the building's glass as if nothing had happened. He stopped for a second on the sidewalk, staring at his own reflection, and felt that quiet kind of shame, not for being fired, but for being treated like helping someone was a flaw. His phone buzzed with some random notification, and he didn't even have the heart to look. He just took a deep breath, like swallowing down a knot. At home, the silence was worse than the "you're fired." Without his routine, time felt wide and cruel. Ethan let his coffee grow cold on the counter while he stared at the wall, trying to understand how 3 years of work could turn into nothing in 1 minute of someone else's arrogance. He thought about calling someone, complaining, yelling, but he didn't have the energy for any of it. And even with his head pounding, he couldn't just become a different person because the world had been unfair. Over the next 2 days, Ethan walked around the city with no real destination, more to avoid suffocating in his apartment than because he believed anything good would happen. At a corner near a gas station, he saw a little girl with a scraped knee trying not to cry, while her mom, a young woman with a tired face, dug through her bag like the entire world depended on finding a bandage. Ethan knelt right there on the pavement, pulled a clean handkerchief from his pocket, improvised a little rap, and spoke softly, like he had all the time in the world. The girl stopped shaking the moment someone treated her pain like it mattered. Her mom's eyes filled with tears as she thanked him, and he brushed it off with a small gesture. No hero act. She's okay. Just a scare. For a few seconds, that simple care for a small hurt felt more like real work than any report he had ever turned in. Later that afternoon, he passed a bus stop and saw an older woman trying to disguise her quiet panic, clutching her phone with a trembling hand. Ethan asked if she was all right, and she finally confessed that her son wasn't answering, and she was afraid she was bothering him, or afraid she was completely alone. He stayed with her in the cold wind, helped her call again, waited by her side, and when the sun finally picked up, the tension in her shoulders collapsed like someone had taken an invisible weight off her back. Ethan walked away with the same emptiness in his chest, only now mixed with an uncomfortable realization. He was still himself, even when nobody was watching. And maybe that was exactly why the next encounter was inevitable. Because without realizing it, he was about to step into a simple cafe, order a basic coffee, and come face to face with someone who had seen everything from the very beginning. 3 days later, Sacramento seemed determined to test Ethan Parker's patience. Money was already tight. His head still ached from the way he'd been fired, and he ducked into a small, midtown cafe just to warm his hands and pretend for 5 minutes that his life still had some kind of routine. The smell of freshly ground coffee and sweet pastries filled the air, and the low music felt distant. He ordered a black coffee, leaned on the counter, and watched the steam rise like it was the only stable thing left. That's when he felt it, before he turned around, a different kind of hush behind him, the way the air changes when someone important walks in. When he turned, he found himself face to face with Claire Bennett, the young executive from the luxury car, flawless even in the way she held her coat. It was obvious she hadn't come by accident. Her focused eyes and calm posture said she'd made a decision long before she opened her mouth. "You're the guy from the crosswalk," she said quietly, with no drama. Ethan froze. For a second, he braced for a complaint or some awkward pity. But Claire kept her eyes on his. "That gentleman, Harold Bennett, the blind man you helped across the street. He's my grandfather." Her words hit him like a weight and a key turning at the same time. His face warmed, not from pride, but from realizing that moment hadn't been as anonymous as he thought. He tried to answer, but Claire kept going, more serious now. "And I'm the new CEO of the company you worked for." Ethan let out a short, disbelieving laugh that came out almost bitter. It sounded like a bad joke. Claire didn't laugh. "Derek Walsh, your manager, was already under investigation. Old complaints, strange decisions, favoritism. And now this." Ethan straightened up like he needed armor. "So that's it? You came to offer me my job back?" She nodded, but with an expression that didn't demand obedience. It asked for understanding. That's when Ethan, voice steady despite the storm inside, finally let out what had been stuck since HR. "I don't want charity. I want justice." His coffee cup shook slightly in his hand, and it wasn't from the cold. Claire took a slow breath, like she respected that line. "I'm not here to buy you off with an apology," she said. "My grandfather built a social impact program inside the company. A serious one, with rules, transparency, real results. And he's been insisting we need someone who doesn't bend easily." Ethan narrowed his eyes, wary, because pretty offers can be traps too. Claire lowered her voice, almost intimate now. "You don't have to come back to prove anything to me. Come back to prove that what they did to you is not the standard. Come back to lead this the right way." Ethan went quiet, staring at the table, feeling his dignity wrestle with his need. One thing was already clear. If he accepted, it wouldn't just be a comeback. It would mean walking back into that building, knowing a lot of people would look at him like he'd gotten some shortcut, and that first day might end up being the cruelest one of all. On the morning Ethan walked back into the company, Sacramento's sky was bright and open, completely out of sync with the tension tied up in his chest. The lobby smelled like expensive coffee, the floors gleamed, and still he stepped in, feeling like he was walking on thin ice. The new badge hanging from his neck felt heavier than the old one, and nobody even tried to hide it. Curious looks, sideways glances, whispers that didn't bother lowering their volume. Bits of conversation floated past him. The CEO brought him back, Grandpa's favorite. Must be nice, and he had to breathe deep just to keep moving. It was either that or shrink. And he'd already spent too many days feeling small over an injustice that wasn't his fault. On the first floor, he met Diana Miles, a sharp-eyed senior analyst who seemed to size people up in seconds. She was polite but cool, the way someone gets after seeing too many favorites rise fast and fall hard. Not long after, he crossed paths with Noah Price from finance, who wore a smile that never quite reached his eyes. "So, you're the social project," Noah said, with a light sarcasm that was anything but innocent. Ethan didn't bite. He asked for full access to reports, spreadsheets, processes, and started from the beginning, with no showmanship. He spent hours reading contracts, cross-checking numbers, scribbling notes, cleaning up inconsistencies like someone slowly clearing out a neglected house. One corner at a time, no shortcuts. No, leave that for later. By the end of the day, his fingers were smudged with printer ink. His head pounded, but the chaos was finally starting to make sense. Over the next few days, he collected both enemies and respect. When someone tried to help by offering shortcuts, Ethan thanked them and pushed back. "If we're doing this, we're doing it right." When a coworker stalled on an important task, he sat down beside them and worked through it without humiliating anyone. When he noticed a mistake that would have blown up in someone else's face later, he warned them early with firmness, but without accusation. Diana, who had barely looked him in the eye before, started paying attention. Noah, who liked to laugh behind people's backs, went quiet when Ethan spoke. It wasn't charisma, it was consistency. And consistency upsets those who live on spin, but it pulls in those who actually care about the work. The big test came in a meeting with investors that was supposed to be nothing more than a formal presentation of the social impact program. At the last second, the slides crashed, the file vanished from the system, and the room fell into that heavy silence that smells like incoming disaster. Ethan stared at the black screen, felt that familiar cold twist in his stomach, then made a choice. He wasn't going to apologize for something out of his control. He closed the laptop, stepped forward, and started talking with nothing in his hands except what he actually knew, numbers he knew by heart. Real stories of impact and a clarity that sounded lived, not rehearsed. He explained how the program would work, how it would be audited, where every dollar would go, and what would happen to anyone who tried to game the system. When he finished, there was no cheesy applause, just a dense, respectful silence before one investor said, "Finally, someone speaking without sugarcoating." Ethan walked out of that room with his heart racing, knowing he just won a crucial battle, and also sensing, deep down, that someone was going to hate him for it. Because when a nobody becomes a symbol of integrity, there's always someone itching to turn off the light. The turnaround Ethan pulled off in that investor meeting didn't just earn him respect, it painted a target on his back. The mood in the building shifted in a way nobody would admit out loud, but everyone could feel. Conversation stopped when he walked by. Emails started coming with way too many people CC'd, like someone was slowly building a case file on him. And in the middle of it all, Derek Walsh reappeared in the hallways with a quiet, satisfied smile, like a man waiting for the perfect moment to pull the rug out from under someone. Ethan pretended not to notice, but his body already had. When you poke a rotten system, the system pushes back. The first lie sprouted small. It started as a whisper. He and Claire are together. That's why he's back. Now it all makes sense. And within days it was treated as obvious truth by people who wanted to believe it. The reality was that Ethan and Claire barely had time to share 2 sentences without someone nearby. But the story still caught fire like dry grass. One afternoon, he overheard a coworker snicker. Bold move, right? And it burned. Not because he was ashamed of what he felt, but because for some people, a man like him could only rise if someone powerful pulled him up. And the worst part? That narrative was perfect fuel for anyone looking to wreck what he was building. Then came the strike disguised as paperwork. One afternoon, he was called into legal and found a thick folder on the table. A printed report full of numbers and neat digital signatures. The accusation was blunt. Fraud in the program's fund transfers, data manipulation, violation of company policy. He read one line, then another, and felt the blood drain into his stomach. It was fake. He knew it. But the forgery was clean, precise, polished in the exact way that fools people who want a simple story. When he tried to push back, the reply was the most dangerous phrase of all. The board will open an investigation. Until then, you're suspended. The room seemed to shrink around him. He stepped out feeling like he was being fired all over again. But this time, not for being late. This time, it was for something that could stain his name forever. That night, he got a short text from an unknown number. Come to Harold's place. Now. Ethan almost ignored it. Part of him wanted to lock himself in and disappear. But something in the urgency pulled him out the door. Harold Bennett's house was elegant without being flashy, with a carefully kept garden and a kind of respectful stillness on the porch. When Ethan walked in, Harold was sitting in an armchair, tea in hand, posture calm like a man who sees more than people think. Sit down, son, he said, as if he already knew the weight Ethan was carrying. Then Harold confessed something that knocked the wind out of him, not to hurt him, but because it was the truth. He admitted he'd watched Ethan before, on different days, and that on that morning at the crosswalk. He had pretended to need help crossing, not to trick Ethan, but to show his granddaughter there were still people who did the right thing with no audience. I didn't plan your firing, Harold said, and his voice cracked on that line, like it hurt him too. I just set up the meeting. The rest was other people's choices. And now I'm watching them repeat the same cruelty, only dressed up nicer. Ethan sat there stunned, not sure whether to feel angry, relieved, or both. Harold turned his face toward him, serious. You're not alone in this, and I'm sure of one thing. Whoever's doing this is going to push as far as they can. The boardroom was big, cold, and filled with that particular silence that isn't peace, it's judgment. Ethan walked in wearing a jacket he didn't even like, feeling the fabric pull at his shoulders, like a reminder that he didn't belong in that world. Around the long table, board members flipped through documents without really looking at him, like the decision was already half made. Claire sat several seats away, posture straight, but her fingers tapping lightly on a pen gave her away. In the corner, Derek radiated a little too much calm, that smugness of someone convinced the game is over before it even starts. When they finally asked Ethan to speak, his throat felt dry. He didn't launch into some eloquent speech. He just told the truth as plainly as he could, that the report was fabricated, that he'd never moved a single dollar off route, that every number in the project had a traceable path. The answer he got was icy, bureaucratic, and irritatingly detached. We hear your position, but we need facts. That's when the real danger clicked into place for him. It wasn't about what he'd done. It was about what it looked like on paper. Derek, in that soft, poisonous tone, added, "It's a shame." He seemed promising. The line floated in the air like toxic smoke, not accusing directly, but planting doubt. Ethan clenched his hand in his pocket so it wouldn't shake. Right then, the door opened. Not with a crash, not with theatrics, just with the quiet certainty of someone who belongs. One board member turned, visibly annoyed. Another raised an eyebrow. And then Harold Bennett walked in, cane in hand, stepped slow but sure. The whole room seemed to hold its breath. Ethan froze. Somehow this man, whom the world saw as fragile, had the presence of someone carrying a truth too heavy to ignore. Claire stood up on reflex, worried, but Harold made a small motion for her to sit. "I'd like to speak," Harold said, and his voice wasn't loud, it was steady. He turned his face toward the table, like he could see each person just by how they were breathing. "This young man helped me without knowing who I was. In the middle of all that noise and hurry, he chose to stop, and he was punished for it. That's not weakness. That's character." His words hit the room like a glass shattering on the floor, simple and impossible to unhear. Derek tried to cut in, mumbling about procedure, but Harold didn't flinch. And before anyone tries to turn this into some soap opera, "I know what's being hinted about him and my granddaughter. Hints aren't proof. And character. You either have it or you fake it." The board members looked at each other, and the whole investigation shifted tone. They still followed protocol, still asked hard questions, but now there was a witness whose testimony didn't need slides or spreadsheets. Ethan wasn't some opportunist cashing in on a connection. Even so, as a matter of policy and to protect the program, the board drew clear lines. Ethan and Claire couldn't be in a direct reporting chain. Any decisions involving both of them would go through audit, not as a punishment, but as armor. Ethan was officially cleared. Claire exhaled like someone who'd been holding tears back for too long. And Derek, for the first time, lost that easy smile, because he realized this story wasn't ending with a forged report. The atmosphere in the company never really went back to normal after that. Instead, it felt like everyone was walking around with invisible headphones on, listening for the next explosion. Ethan kept showing up to work with his name cleared, but without real calm. Every spreadsheet, every approval, every signature felt like someone might be waiting to twist it. Claire tightened controls, brought in an external auditor, and surrounded the social impact program with strong rules. But there was one variable nobody could fully control: Derek Walsh's bitterness. He moved through the halls with forced politeness, shaking hands, praising results. But when his eyes slid past Ethan, it was like he was silently circling a date on the calendar. The blow landed on a Friday, just before quitting time, when most people's brains were already halfway home. Ethan got a system alert: critical inconsistency in program disbursements. He rushed to finance and found a scene. That made his stomach flip, records showing altered codes, brand new vendors that had appeared out of nowhere, and a path of approvals designed to make it look like the program was bleeding money. Within minutes, rumors were racing. "The program's a fraud. There's your scandal." Knew this was coming. Ethan felt his chest tighten. This wasn't just his reputation on the line. It was the survival of the whole program, and the proof everyone needed to say, smugly, "See? You can't trust this stuff." The board called an emergency meeting. This time, the mood was uglier, more impatient. Nobody likes feeling exposed. Derek arrived with a fresh folder, acting like a man reluctantly doing the dirty work. He spoke with that smooth, practiced calm. "I warned this program carried serious risk. Now we have documented evidence of misuse." Ethan wanted to explode, to shout, to call it what it was. But he realized it was exactly the reaction Derek was fishing for, to make him look panicked and guilty. Claire tried to keep control, asking for technical verification. And Derek threw out one more toxic aside: "Audits can be manipulated too." That one line was enough to poison the room. Ethan glanced around and saw people looking away, protecting themselves, ready to jump ship. Then the twist arrived in the most unlikely way. The door opened again, not just for Harold this time, but for Harold with an aide carrying something small and ordinary: a digital recorder. Harold walked slowly to the table and placed the device in the center, like he was setting down a stone. "Before you decide anything, listen to this," he said. A board member tried to block him, citing process, but Harold's voice didn't waver. Process cannot matter more than truth. The recording played, first breathing, then a familiar voice. Derek speaking in a low, confident tone, laying out a plan for someone nearby. He talked about tweaking reports, switching codes, creating a trail to make it look like it came from the project. And then came the line that killed any doubt. They'll have to shut it down. And Ethan goes down with it. That'll teach Claire she's not the only one in charge. The room went ice cold. One board member covered his mouth. Another shoved his chair back too hard. Claire went pale but didn't look away. Ethan felt a weird mix of relief and nausea. The truth was out, but it tasted bitter, knowing how far Derek had been willing to go. There was no space left for speeches. The board moved fast, the way people only move when the threat has become too obvious to ignore. Derek tried to talk, to laugh it off, to claim it was out of context, but there was no context that could rescue him. He was fired for cause on the spot and reported for formal charges. When he was escorted out, the mask was gone. All that was left was a small man crushed by his own hunger for control. The program stayed standing. For the first time in a long time, the company seemed to inhale like someone had opened a window and let the poison out. But with Derek gone, a quieter tension took his place, more personal, more private. No one could pretend they didn't see the connection between Ethan and Claire anymore. And after everything that had happened, hiding what they felt would have been its own form of cowardice. While being honest about it could easily turn into the next battlefield. In the weeks after Derek's fall, the company moved through a kind of moral hangover. There were no fireworks, just the uneasy realization that everyone had been walking through something rotten and calling it just how things are. Ethan kept doing his job with that rock-in-your-pocket feeling. The truth had won, but people still stared, wondered, and itched to turn his life into gossip. At the center of all that buzz was the one connection nobody could ignore anymore. Him and Claire. Not because they put themselves on display, but because after everything, the pretense of just colleagues no longer fit. Claire asked Ethan to meet in a small conference room. No audience, blinds half closed, office noise faint in the background. She didn't show up with flowers or grand speeches. She came with reality. If we handle this the wrong way, it becomes ammo all over again, she said, looking him straight in the eye. Ethan was quiet for a few seconds, then answered with the calm of someone tired of having his story written by others. Then we do it the right way, in the open. They laid out ground rules like they were signing a survival pact. No decisions about his work made in private. No special treatment. No closed-door meetings that could be twisted. When Claire sighed, exhausted, Ethan added under his breath, "When you stop hiding, gossip runs out of oxygen." It didn't sound pretty, but it sounded true. The day they made it official, they didn't stage a dramatic reveal or turn it into a show. They held a straightforward meeting with legal and compliance present and followed it up with a clear internal memo. Claire didn't romanticize her title, and Ethan didn't play the victim card. They spoke with respect and firmness. Yes, there's a relationship. Yes, there will be formal boundaries. Yes, any irregularity will be treated like it would with anyone else. The room reacted in strange ways. Some people looked embarrassed for having fed the rumors. Some looked disappointed that the drama had been reduced to policy, and a few quietly seemed to admire the courage it took to speak plainly. That same week, just as the scandal fog was starting to lift, surprising news arrived. A national foundation that evaluates corporate social impact programs, the kind that takes reputation, seriously reached out asking for an urgent presentation. Not for a flashy awards show, but for a deep dive. Auditing, verification, tough questions. Ethan and the team worked late nights compiling evidence, metrics, traceability, testimonials, everything proving the project wasn't just a slide deck. In the end, the foundation confirmed the program would receive a national award for integrity and impact, and the story The Crosswalk, the firing, the sabotage, and its downfall would become an internal reference for what the company would never again tolerate. That's when Ethan really felt the weight and quiet beauty of what was happening. This wasn't about climbing the ladder. It was about not having to twist himself out of shape to fit inside a powerful place. Still with the relationship out in the open, and the program under a brighter spotlight than ever, one last step was needed. The one Harold had insisted on from the very beginning. Some crossings in life have to be done the second time the right way if you really want to leave injustice behind. A few days later, Ethan found himself back at that same intersection in Sacramento without fully knowing why, just feeling that he needed to be there. The noise sounded familiar. Cars rushing past, impatient horns, pedestrians racing the red light like the world was ending in 5 seconds. This time, though, he wasn't standing there with his heart racing, terrified of being late for work. He stood on the curb for a moment, watching the patterns of traffic, and realized the scene didn't weigh on him the way it used to. The same place that had cost him his job was about to give him back a different kind of peace. Harold Bennett arrived first, white cane tapping lightly, posture calm, not asking permission to take up space. Ethan stepped forward slowly and offered his arm just like he had that first time, but now with a small, quiet smile, as if he recognized the moment as his starting point. Harold's hand gripped his forearm, firm and sure, and that was enough to bring a lump to Ethan's throat. Right behind them came Claire. No luxury car this time, no CEO distance, just a granddaughter and a woman who had decided to stop watching life from behind glass. She rested her hand on her grandfather's shoulder, and for a second, the three of them just stood there, side by side, waiting for the light like anybody else. When the signal changed, they crossed together. It wasn't a dramatic, slow-motion moment. It was simple, but there was one huge difference. No one was trying to prove anything anymore. Ethan noticed that, on the other side, his chest didn't tighten the way it had that first day. The memory of being fired was still there, but it no longer owned him. He heard the sound of their steps on the asphalt, felt the wind on his face, and thought about how easily everything could have collapsed, and how, out of sheer stubbornness to do the right thing, it had been rebuilt. Claire looked at him with a clear, direct gaze, and he understood that from here on out, no title or status was going to define what they were to each other. On the far side of the crosswalk, Harold stopped and smiled in that small, satisfied way of someone finally closing a circle only he had seen from the beginning. He turned his face toward Ethan and said calmly, "Doing the right thing is never a waste of time." Ethan lowered his head, took a slow breath, and let that line settle in as a kind of rest. Before the moment could turn into nothing more than a pretty ending, one simple question hung in the air, the kind each person answers with their own life. Do you believe that goodness finds its way back, even in a world that sometimes tries to punish the people who choose it?